Welcome to Hague Talks, the podcast, where we hear directly from some of the Hague Talks community about how they're setting peace and justice in motion.
My name is Fatsah Ouguergouz, and I am currently the rector of the African Institute of International Law, and this is in this capacity that I visited The Hague with my esteemed colleague, Chief Justices of 9 African countries.
Hi, I'm Janet Anderson, and I caught up with Fatsah Ouguergouz during the Hague Justice Week last June in The Hague. So if you hear seagulls during the conversation, you're warned. As the director of the African Institute of International Law, AFIL, Fatsah explained that although Africa already plays a big role in international law, there are many diverse areas where African voices are needed and African expertise can be encouraged, despite the limited resources available. So I asked Fatsah what this African Institute of International Law can do. What role does AFIL play in helping to develop that role?
We are trying to promote the rule of law through various means, and one of them is teaching and trying to do capacity building. So we are doing this kind of trainings in order to make certain stakeholders more aware of major international problems, such, for example, the weight of the African states in the world agenda, I would say, in the world issues. Continental shelf, for example. The continental shelf is very important as far as the resources, natural resources are concerned. So the African Institute is organizing a training on the continental shelves. So this is one thing. We are also organizing trainings, and we are aiming at organizing more trainings in the field of economic and trade law, which is very important. The African states have established the widest regional integration organization as far as trade is concerned, and this has come to reality a couple of years ago. So this is the African Free Trade Area, which consists of 55 African states, which makes it the largest trade integration organization in the world. So this is also one aspect of the work of the African Institute, trying also to promote the investments. The rule of law is very important in order to attract investments. Investors are not willing to invest in a country when they expect that it might be some turmoil, or if the country is unstable, or if they don't trust the judicial system. So this is the ultimate goal, is to set up, to have independent judiciary systems in Africa, which could handle disputes relating to investments. So now most of the investment disputes, if not all the investment disputes, are dealt with by arbitral tribunals located outside the continent.
Exactly. They're located in places like The Hague, Geneva, etc., and they can be quite secretive, can't they?
Most of them are secretive, and they are handled mostly by arbitrators coming from the West, organized outside Africa, and the legal teams also most of the time consist of non-African lawyers, whereas we have the resources, the human resources as well. So the African Institute is also organizing. I took myself the lead in organizing training sessions in investment law and arbitration. So this is also the way for us to promote investment in Africa, in order to make investors more confident, and also to train the government officials when they negotiate bilateral investment treaties, to be very aware of what
the implications are of the treaties where they agree to these arbitration mechanisms that are completely unclear and maybe sometimes a little biased towards some of the companies?
I wouldn't say biased, but most of them are always in the interest of the investors. And African states, most of the time, they don't have the resources, human resources, to look into those agreements, so they sign them. And when there's a dispute, they are complaining and they say, but we don't abide by this. But you have signed and you have ratified, so now you have to bear the consequences. So this is also the kind of training we are doing. Also, you mentioned the Chief Justices. This is also something we try to expose national judges to international issues, which is very important. For them, it's a really eye-opener.
How is it eye-opening? Is it the range of subjects that are dealt with at the international level, or what is new for them?
Of course, the range of subject, the proceeding, the organization, the structure of the institutions. They are very impressed by the structure, because international structures are made of international judges. So they are surprised sometimes to find an interpretation booth. What is this? It's an interpretation booth. So they are surprised to see that there's a full-fledged legal team devoted to the functioning of the tribunal. Also interested in the subject matter, because they are not really acquainted with international law, so they ask questions about international law. What is the applicable law? What is the proceedings? Because, they are also, let's say these 9 judges that came, they are coming from common law system.
Because they're Anglophone, and therefore, because of the history of colonialism, they've ended up with common law systems
Common
often.
law, and you have the civil law systems like my country, Algeria, so civil law. So I will give an example concerning this issue of learning about international judicial proceedings. This morning we went to the International Court of Justice, and they wanted to attend a hearing. So they attended the hearing. Myself, I left because I have other engagement. I came back and I asked one of the judges, I said, "Did you enjoy this morning?" He said, "Yeah, great. We wish we could have spent more time there." And just sitting and listening, because,
to hear the quality of the arguments, the style, the way that it works.
The style. And one of the judges told me, I was very much impressed by such an officer, such a legal counsel. And by the way, I was also impressed by the decorum. They let the lawyers speak. The judges are not speaking. And this is in the common law system. The judges are constantly interacting with the lawyers. So the lawyers sometimes don't have the time to speak. And he said, but yes, they are sitting and they are listening, staying quiet, so you don't know what they are thinking. I say, yes, this is how the International Court is working. And they ask questions, but at the end.
You talk about the promotion of the rule of law. There is some sense that I hear, a critique that I hear, that sometimes that you talk about it to enable investment and to enable African countries to have a fair role in the international system. But there is a critique of this promotion of the rule of law, that in fact it is simply, again, it's neocolonialism. It's trying to promote Western countries and their perspectives, again, by another mechanism. Do you find that you have to counter those arguments to enable people to understand what's useful about the promotion of the rule of law?
I think there's a common understanding about justice. There are shared values, both as far as the rule of law is concerned, both as far as, I would say, democracy is concerned, participating process. I mean, whatever the way people are participating to the life of the nation, there are shared values about that. Afterwards, you can discuss about having a parliament, having a court, a Supreme Court, a Privy Council. This is another discussion. But as far as the rule of law is concerned, rule of law is a complex concept. It has many components, and one of them is the independence of the justice, the accountability, even accountability. Accountability is not a European concept or Western concept. It existed, and it still exists in traditional communities. Participation to the public affairs of the group, I would say the group, because if you go, we have the concept of Jum'ah in Africa, everywhere. So they sit around the baobab. I'm talking about sub-Saharan countries, and they discuss the assembly of the eldest. So there's this participation, there's this interaction. So I don't think that the issue of democracy, the issue of the concept of justice itself, without speaking about access or independence, the concept of justice, the concept of democracy, the concept of the rule of law, the concept of accountability are shared values. And then maybe the mechanism can be said as being borrowed from colonial powers, like for the civil law or for the common law. But I don't think it's a criticism which should be acknowledged, but I don't think it's totally fair.
In other regions, we have the development of regional mechanisms, courts. Think about the European Court of Human Rights, think about the Inter-American Court. And we've seen the beginnings of new mechanisms, new courts within Africa. What's your assessment of how those developments are going?
Why didn't you mention the African Court of Human and People's Rights, which is an African court? There's also the African Court. Aside the European and the Inter-American Court, the African continent has also devised its own instrument and its own mechanism, which is the African Court based in Arusha, that you know very well. So I think it's very important to have regional courts, because in any case, there's no universal courts. It's very difficult to ask 193 states to around the table. States are very jealous of their sovereignty. So they don't want to relinquish it. So what is not possible at the universal level, it's possible in a smaller framework, which is the regional or the sub-regional. So the African states have also engaged in this process of international justiciability in the field of human rights. So they have created the African Court of Human and People's Rights in 1998 by the Ouagadougou Protocol.
Not everybody has signed up to it.
33 states, and only 8 have accepted the jurisdiction of the court to deal with communication application filed by individuals. So this is, it's half success, but it's a beginning. So what I would say, I think that it's work in progress as far as the African Court is concerned. You have also sub-regional courts like the ECOWAS Court of Justice, which is also dealing with human rights issues. There are sometimes some step back, like the SADC Court. SADC Court of Justice was also dealing with human rights cases. But at one stage, it was suspended by the African member states of the SADC community because they were considering that this court didn't have the jurisdiction to deal with human rights cases. So now this court is at a standstill. You have also the East African Court of Justice, which also is dealing with human rights issues, in spite of the fact that they don't have the jurisdiction to do so, but they draw from their rules and they dealt with some issues relating to human rights, even though the state parties to the East African community didn't agree with that, saying, but we didn't yet entitle you to do so. But they did in the past.
Well, looking at all of these different developments that you've enumerated, is it 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back? No,
I would say, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Yeah, I think it's normal. It's like a child, a child who, when he learns to walk, he walks steps, he falls, he stands up again, but it will come.
Fatsah has also been in some top roles in international law. He was one of the first 11 judges at the African Court on Human and People's Rights in Arusha, worked as a senior official in the registry of the International Court of Justice, and he chaired the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Burundi, and the list goes on. So I asked him how his upbringing motivated him to pursue this stellar legal career. Tell me about yourself. You're from Algeria. What kind of family background do you come from?
My father was a coal miner, peace to his soul. He passed away 8 years ago. My mother was raising her 12 children. Two of them died. The father of my mother and her brother died in Algeria during the war.
The War of Independence.
So my mother, just before I was born, she lost 2 kids, and she lost her father and her brother. And before that, she lost also 1 brother during the Second World War. So lots of casualty, lots of suffering. And I think my father brought my mother to France because of that. So they immigrated in France in 1958. And I was the first living boy and living child born in France in a clinic. My mother used to give birth
at home?
At home in a very poor house. She told me there were snakes on the ceilings and the wind. There was wind. There was dust. Everything. They were cooking in a fire. There was no cooker. There was just a fire. So everything was black. And this is the circumstances in which my parents immigrated to France, and I was born in those circumstances. And as I didn't mention, but they were illiterate. My mother cannot read, cannot speak French. She speaks words, and she cannot write. My father neither. So I was born like this. I was already very early conscious about the importance of education.
Why was that?
Because I was guiding my mother to go to doctors, to go to the social security, to walk in the streets. So I have to learn the plates, the name of the streets. I have to learn how to speak, to address the doctor, to address the social assistants, at school as well. I have to speak with my teachers. And I have to write letters to Algeria. I have to fill up the forms. So I know all the birth dates of my brothers and sisters. I know the social security number of my father because it's
you were the responsible person in the family. Did that also push you towards your career in law? I mean, did it push you towards wanting to see some kind of justice?
Certainly. My mother kept telling me that my great-grandfather was a qadi, a judge. So this is the my link to justice, but maybe when I grew, I saw lots of injustice. When I was 10, 9, I don't remember, we were living in a slum in France. I mean, there was the windows where there were stalactites, ice inside the windows. I remember playing with that. It was cold inside, so to have ice in the house. And outside there was a river with rats, I remember. There were all the garbage of the city going there, but we were playing with rats. I remember fishing rats. So the windows were totally broken. And we went to the maklar, the person who rented, the agent who rented the place. And I remember we came into the office. I was small, actually. The counter was high. And my mother, there were people in the room, customers, and they were behind the bank. And my mother complained. She said, could you please come and fix the windows? And she said, oh, no, we cannot. So and my mother started to explain again. And then the man came, the owner came, the maklar came, the agent came, and he looked at my mother. He said, come and get off of here. You want us to fix you pay a very amount of every month, and you want us to fix the dégagez, go away. Get lost. Yeah, very unpolite. And I was very sad, actually. I was very sad. And I knew how much it was, actually. We were paying 130 francs at that time, which is 20 euros every 3 months. 7 euros a month. I remember because I was handling the budget of the house. So to come back to this man, on his door, when we went down, I looked, Marcel Imbert, his name, Marcel Imbert, doctor en droit, a lawyer. Just to tell you how life goes, you know. And I say, okay. And then time passes, we move to a suburb, and then suburb in France, harassed by the police, blah, blah, blah. I saw friends of mine going to jail. We were harassed for nothing. You know, just we're gathering, because there was no place to gather. We're gathering in cellars or downstairs in the street, and they were harassing us. And I said, okay, I will study law. And the second year, there was a conference at the law school given by a certain Marcel Imbert, coming to explain what you can do with law. You can also be a real estate agent. So he came, and I said, this is the time for me to take my revenge, or kind of revenge. So I went there, and when I was in the room, amphitheater, I saw an old man there. And I said, okay. He paid his price. I mean, he was not in a good shape. I said, let's go. So this is about studying law. So I studied law. But at one stage, I was not comfortable anymore with being a lawyer. I wanted to become a lawyer. But I was not French in any case. I was not French at that time. I was Algerian. So I lived all my life in France as an Algerian, as a foreigner. Very complex to become a lawyer. Very complex to get into the network, because it was important too. And I didn't feel at ease with national law. And I said, okay, I will become a diplomat. I didn't speak Arabic. I said, I want to become a diplomat for Algeria. So I decided to study international law. But at that time, I didn't have money in any case. I didn't have money to go to study. There was one of my professors who was very nice to me, actually, told me there's an institute in Geneva. I think maybe you should inquire. I inquired, and it was a very prestigious institute. I applied, and I was admitted. But the problem was money. But in any case, I remember I left in October 1980. I took the train. I arrived in Geneva with 800 Swiss francs in the pocket. Not even 1 month. But I say I will try my luck, actually. I arrived the Wednesday, and Thursday I was working in the street already. And I was very lucky. You took your chance, and now here you are, one of the senior judges in international law. Thank you very much for the compliment. Yeah, so this is the Maktoub I see. I believe in the Maktoub. Actually, if you try your luck, you are always helped. Thank you, Fatsah, for sharing your personal experience. And thank you for shedding light on the important role that the rule of law can play in the African continent. Check out all the podcasts for Hague Talks. This first collection is around Hague Justice Week, with some of the great people setting peace and justice in motion. And don't forget to like and share Hague Talks, the podcast.